Being one of the most well-known dentists in the city had its perks. My name, Ethan Carter, was printed on half the billboards in town, and my office was always fully booked. People trusted me with their smiles, and that trust had made me a wealthy man. But the downside? Long hours, constant demands, and the feeling that I was more married to my career than to my actual wife. I had always believed that my wife, Jessica, understood. After all, we had no kids, just the two of us in a beautiful house that my hard work had paid for. We had agreed that I'd work to give us a life others envied while she enjoyed the luxury of not having to. It wasn't a perfect marriage, but it was supposed to be built on mutual respect. That illusion shattered the day my friend's wife, Emily, showed up at my clinic. Emily was the kind of woman who always had an exhausted but kind look about her. She wasn't the type to seek drama, which is why I was surprised when she asked if we could talk in private. She looked nervous, hands fidgeting in her lap, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan. I don't know how to say this, but I thought you should know. My husband, Mark, he's been spending a lot of time at your house." I felt a strange, cold sensation creep up my spine. I frowned. "At my house? That's impossible. I'd know." She shook her head. "I don't think you would." She hesitated before adding, "I didn't want to believe it either, but I saw messages." I confronted him. He admitted it. He and Jessica, she swallowed hard. They've been seeing each other for months. The words didn't register at first. I felt like she had spoken in another language, like my brain refused to translate. Jessica. My wife. The woman who always acted like she was waiting up for me, complaining about how late I worked, how lonely she was. She was cheating on me. And with Mark, someone I had trusted. I wanted to call Jessica right then and there, to demand an explanation. But Emily grabbed my wrist. "I need you to hear me out," she said. "She's been lying to you. A lot. She told Mark you barely come home. That you don't care about her. That your marriage has been dead for years." My stomach turned. "Mark said she told him that she's planning to leave you soon. That she's just waiting for the right moment to take what she can." I had to grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. My entire life, everything I had worked for, was being rewritten right in front of me. The woman I had trusted, the home I had built, the marriage I had believed in, all of it was a lie. And the worst part? I had no idea. Emily squeezed my hand before leaving. "I know this is hard," she said. "But you deserve to know the truth." The moment she walked out, I took a deep breath and grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to call Jessica. No, I needed to see this for myself. Because if this was true, if she had truly betrayed me, then I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make her regret every single lie she had ever told. The ride home after hearing Emily's confession felt surreal. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, yet I barely felt the pressure. My mind was a storm of memories, Jessica's long showers before I got home, the way she'd started sleeping with her phone under her pillow, the sudden interest in going to yoga 3 nights a week. I had been a fool. But I wasn't going to act on impulse. No, that wasn't my style. A lifetime of discipline and precision had made me a man of control. If Jessica thought she could outmaneuver me, she had no idea who she was dealing with. And then, as if the universe had a twisted sense of humor, an opportunity presented itself the very next day. Mark called my clinic. I nearly laughed when my receptionist told me he was requesting an appointment. It was almost poetic. The man sleeping with my wife needed my expertise, my precision. I made sure he got a same-day appointment. A friend deserves priority, after all. When he arrived, he greeted me like nothing had happened. I could see it in his eyes, zero guilt, zero hesitation. Maybe he thought I didn't know. Maybe he thought Jessica had covered her tracks well enough. But I knew. I smiled, friendly, professional, the way I had always been with him. I told him that, as a sign of our friendship, I'd do a full examination of his teeth for free. If I found anything, I'd give him a huge discount on the treatment. He was grateful. I led him into my office and had him settle into the reclining chair. The bright overhead light illuminated his face, his trust in me almost insulting. As I prepared my instruments, I took my time, ensuring every move was slow and deliberate. I started the examination. My gloved fingers pressed against his jaw, my tools tapping against his molars, exploring every ridge and cavity. I murmured observations, nodding to myself. I could see the tension in his shoulders easing. He thought he was in good hands. And in a way, he was. I made my diagnosis. I told him he had some deep-seated issues that needed immediate intervention. He nodded, trusting me completely. He didn't even ask questions when I prepped the anesthesia, inserting the needle with the care of an artist. He sighed as the numbness set in, his eyelids drooping slightly, comfortable. That's when I started. One by one, I pulled them. The molars first, silent and obedient as they left their roots. Then the premolars, slipping out with ease. He barely reacted, the anesthesia working perfectly. But as I reached the front teeth, the anesthesia wasn't quite as effective anymore. He twitched when I grasped his incisor, his fingers clenching the armrests. A weak sound came from the back of his throat, but I reassured him. My voice was calm, soothing. He let me continue. When the last tooth came free, I wiped his mouth carefully, clearing the pooling blood. His head lolled slightly. The drugs were making him sluggish, confused. I leaned in, looking into his dazed, blurry eyes. That's when I, accidentally, remembered something. I mentioned that Emily had visited me yesterday. The reaction was immediate. His whole body jerked, a flash of panic breaking through the numbing haze. He tried to speak, but his words slurred, unintelligible. His eyes widened in fear. And in that exact moment, my hand slipped. The scalpel in my other hand nicked his tongue. Just a small cut, not enough to cause real damage, but enough to be noticed. Enough to make every word he spoke sting for weeks. I pretended to be concerned, apologizing in the same professional tone I had used throughout the procedure. I assured him it was a minor accident, nothing serious. Just a little bad luck. I let him sit there for a moment, watching him struggle to process what had happened. His tongue throbbed, his mouth an empty, aching void. He groggily reached up, fingers tracing his gums, the realization dawning in slow, creeping horror. His mouth was ruined. I handed him a mirror, feigning concern. His reflection showed a raw, empty space where his perfect teeth had once been. Blood still pooled at the corners of his lips. I saw the panic take hold, the dawning comprehension that something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. And then, when his terrified, pleading eyes met mine, I smiled. A small, professional smile. Nothing more. Because I hadn't done anything wrong. I had just done my job. And unfortunately for him, there was nothing left to fix. Mark's rage was delicious to watch. He had stumbled out of my office like a drunk, a swollen mess of drool and blood, clutching his ruined mouth in disbelief. I almost wished I could have seen the moment he truly understood, the moment the drugs wore off, the anesthesia faded, and he realized there was no fixing what had been done. As expected, he tried to fight back. He went to lawyers, demanded lawsuits, threatened to ruin my career. But Mark had a problem. No one believed him. I was Dr. Ethan Carter, one of the best dentists in the city, a man with an impeccable reputation. I had patients who swore by my work, colleagues who respected me, and a pristine record that left no room for doubt. And then there was Mark. A nobody in comparison. A man suddenly missing all his teeth, slurring accusations no one took seriously. He tried to claim malpractice, but without proof, without evidence, his case was dead on arrival. Even if he did manage to find some lawyer desperate enough to take him on, the process would take years, years that he would spend humiliated, toothless, and bleeding money in legal fees. But the best part? He thought that was the worst of it. He had no idea it was only beginning. That very evening, Emily and I sat down to plan the next stage. She had been patient, waiting for her moment, and now it had arrived. She was done playing the role of the betrayed wife, the one who begged for explanations and swallowed lies. Now, she wanted everything. And I was going to help her take it. She had already been gathering evidence, text messages, call logs, bank statements showing money mysteriously disappearing from their accounts. Late-night withdrawals, secret hotel bookings, receipts for expensive gifts that had never made it into her hands. A life lived in deception, now meticulously documented. With this, Emily went straight to a lawyer. She filed for divorce, citing infidelity, financial misconduct, and emotional neglect. She sued for the house, for their joint assets, for every last dollar she could legally claim. Mark, of course, panicked. He tried to negotiate, to stall, to make promises he had no intention of keeping. But he was cornered. No leverage, no sympathy, no one left to fight for him. While his world crumbled, I made sure my presence was felt. Every time he saw me, standing tall and composed, flashing a polite, knowing smile, he flinched. His mouth, still raw and healing, would twitch in pain, a reminder of the price he had already paid. But there was one more person who needed to be dealt with. Jessica. She had no idea what was coming. She had spent months sneaking around, weaving her lies, believing she had outplayed me. Even now, she probably thought she was safe, waiting for the moment she could walk away with half of everything I owned. But I wasn't about to let that happen. Emily and I agreed, it was time to pay Jessica a visit. This wasn't about anger anymore. That stage had passed. What burned in me now was something colder, sharper. A need for control, for justice, for the perfect execution of a plan meticulously crafted. Mark had been a satisfying warm-up, but Jessica. Jessica was going to be the masterpiece. Jessica had no idea what was waiting for her. She had spent months weaving a web of lies, thinking she was the smartest person in the room, thinking she had outmaneuvered me. But the thing about liars is that they always believe their own stories. And that was her biggest mistake. I didn't play games when I confronted her. I wanted to see the moment she realized it was over. I asked her directly, why? Why did she betray me? Why did she lie to my face, night after night, pretending she was waiting for me while sneaking around with Mark? She tried to act confused at first. That typical fake innocence, the widening of her eyes, the slight shake of her head as if she had no idea what I was talking about. But I had no patience for it. I laid it all out, the messages, the bank transactions, the nights she thought I wasn't paying attention. I told her what I knew, how long I had known, and just how deep her betrayal ran. That was when the mask cracked. At first, she tried to turn it on me. Accusations about how I was never home, how I didn't give her enough attention, how she was lonely. As if that justified her actions. As if sneaking around with my so-called friend was somehow my fault. I let her speak. Let her dig her own grave. And then, when she was done, I informed her about the divorce. That was when I saw the first real flicker of panic. She hadn't expected me to move so quickly. Maybe she thought she had more time. That she could play the victim, twist things to her advantage. She recovered fast, though, smug confidence replacing fear. She thought she was still in control. She thought she would walk away with half of everything I owned. That was the best part. Watching the exact moment she realized that wasn't going to happen. Everything I had, the business, the investments, the assets, had been earned before I met her. Not a single penny of it was marital property. She was entitled to exactly nothing. Her arrogance shattered. She started grasping at anything she could, claims of emotional distress, of the lifestyle she had become accustomed to, of how unfair it was that she would be left with nothing. That was when I made her an offer. Out of the kindness of my heart, I told her she could keep the house. That beautiful, expensive home she had used to entertain Mark behind my back. The place where she had built her fantasy of a new life without me. But that was all she was getting. Not a single dollar. Not a car. Not a share in my business. Nothing. Just an empty house and the realization that she had thrown away everything for a man who, at that very moment, was watching his own life collapse. She refused to believe it at first. She thought there had to be some loophole, some way to manipulate the situation. But as the truth settled in, I watched the panic turn to anger. She raged, insulted me, accused me of being heartless. But I wasn't angry anymore. I just stood there, calm, collected, watching as she unraveled. It was only when she realized there was nothing left to say, no more excuses to make, no more lies to tell, that she finally stopped. For the first time in a long time, she was silent. And then, without another word, I turned and walked away. Jessica had wanted a fresh start. Now she had one. Alone. Time passed, but Jessica didn't disappear. At first, it was anger. She sent emails filled with rage, demanding what she believed she was owed. She tried to twist the story, painting herself as the victim, acting as if I had somehow wronged her. She wanted money, wanted compensation for the life she had lost, for the lifestyle she could no longer afford. When anger didn't work, she moved to threats. She claimed she would expose me, ruin my reputation, make sure people knew what a terrible husband I had been. She even hinted at legal action, thinking she could scare me into handing over a settlement. But she had no leverage. The truth was on my side. Everyone knew what she had done. She was the cheater, the liar, the woman who had gambled everything and lost. And the more she tried to lash out, the more pathetic she looked. Eventually, the threats stopped. Then came the begging. The emails softened. The messages turned apologetic. She missed me. She regretted everything. She had made a mistake, and she wanted another chance. She claimed she had been blinded by temptation, that Mark had manipulated her. I didn't respond. Jessica had made her choices, and she was living with the consequences. I heard she had to sell the house. Maintaining it without my income had been impossible. The luxury she had once flaunted slipped through her fingers. She moved into a smaller place, downgraded her car, and from what I heard, struggled to keep up. She had wanted a fresh start. She got one. But not the way she had imagined. As for Mark, I never saw him again. He vanished from my life, which was just fine with me. But I never forgot what I had done to him. I could still picture his face in the mirror when he saw his mouth for the first time, the horror in his eyes as he ran his tongue over empty gums. A fitting punishment for someone who had tried to take what was mine. Life went on. My work remained steady, my reputation untarnished. Patients still trusted me. Friends still respected me. I hadn't lost anything. If anything, I had gained something more valuable than money or property. Control. And through it all, there was Emily. She and I had seen each other occasionally after everything settled. At first, it was just casual. Shared experiences, mutual understanding. Two people who had been betrayed, helping each other navigate the wreckage. But something shifted over time. The conversations lasted longer. The meetings became more frequent. She wasn't just a reminder of the past, she became part of the present. There was a moment, one evening, when I realized we had stopped talking about Mark and Jessica. We weren't just bonded by our pain anymore. We were just, us. Maybe it was too soon to call it anything more. Maybe we were still healing. But as I sat across from her, watching the way her lips curved into a smile, the way her eyes held something warm, something real. I wondered. Maybe this wasn't just about surviving betrayal. Maybe it was about finding something better. And maybe, just maybe, I already had.